Hi, Michelle Glass here, and welcome back to another episode of our Chapter 4, Lecture 4. We are moving into a series of videos that are discussing our different types of organelles. Remember, our term organelle is like tiny organ. These are structures inside of the cell that have their own specialized anatomy or structure, and physiology, which of course means job or function. We're going to see that there are 4 categories of organelles, so we do have 4 additional videos to look at as we move on into our rest of our series. So here we're looking at our genetic control organelles, so that's where we're going to start for today. There are 2 important organelles in this category. We have the nucleus, which of course is specific to eukaryotic cells. And then we have ribosomes, which are actually found across the board, universal to both prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, but they do look different, whether it's a prokaryotic ribosome or a eukaryotic ribosome. Okay, so when we're looking at our cell, very often on our stain preparations, we'll see a darkly stained nucleus, and often it's at the center of the cell. Sometimes the cell has just one nucleus, and sometimes they may have more than one nucleus, and we call that multinucleated. If we have more than one nucleus, we say that it has many nuclei, so that's the plural form of our word here. The nucleus contains the DNA molecule. The DNA molecule can be in one of 2 possible configurations. So if it's organized, tightly packaged around proteins, we call those chromosomes. But when the DNA is relaxed and spread out in the nucleus, we call that chromatin. So unless you see distinctly stained structures inside the nucleus, you're looking at this, just a dark mass that is representing the DNA as the chromatin form. We'll talk about chromosomes later as we start looking at cell division. We will see that the nucleus is membrane bound. Remember, that's important. The membrane of the nucleus is very special. It's described as a nuclear envelope. And the job here is to control what gets in and out of the nucleus, which is, of course, great, right? Because our DNA, our hereditary molecule, is inside that nucleus, and it needs to be protected. So that's a good thing. We also will see that messenger RNA, or mRNA, will be produced in the nucleus through a process called transcription. Now, we'll be talking more about mRNA in the future. We'll have a whole chapter that investigates this process of transcription in a lot of detail. So just start to memorize that transcription is happening here in the nucleus. That will help you. You also have kind of a more darkly stained specialized structure at the center of the nucleus. This is termed the nucleolus, and this is actually where ribosomal RNA is going to be produced. Ribosomal RNA is abbreviated with a little r, and then the capital R, capital N, capital A abbreviation. Now, the next structure for us to look at is the ribosome. The ribosomes can be described as either free, so that means they're just out there in the cytoplasm or in the cytosol, or they can be attached, and that means they're actually anchored to and a part of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. We're going to be looking at the rough endoplasmic reticulum in more detail in our next video, so we'll talk about it again. No matter whether a ribosome is free or attached, it has the same job. Our ribosomes are composed of that little r, big RNA, which remember is standing for ribosomal RNA. So there's a direct relationship here. The nucleolus makes the rRNA, and then the rRNA is going to form the ribosome. The ribosome is the location of protein synthesis. So that means we're going to make our protein here. The process of making that protein is called translation. And again, we're going to be talking about that in a later chapter. So go ahead and start to memorize that making proteins is called translation, and that process is happening in the ribosome. Remember, ribosomes are universally found in prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. They just have a slightly different structure. If you see a cell that has a whole lot of ribosomes, then that tells you that that cell does a whole lot of protein synthesis. So as we look at our different types of cells and different organisms or different locations of our body or other organisms, we will see that the compositions will be different based on the jobs for those particular cells. Okay, so let's kind of look at the big picture here. So we talked about the process of transcription, which is making starting with DNA and then making that into an mRNA, is happening inside the nucleus. What we see is that the mRNA will actually leave the nucleus and carry the recipe for making the protein to that ribosome. At the ribosome, that's actually where the protein gets made. So think of that as the kitchen that actually cook up the protein. You might want to think about, that DNA molecule as like grandma's cookbook, and it never leaves grandma's kitchen. But if you want one of grandma's recipes, you're allowed to maybe take a photograph of that using your phone or writing it down on an index card, and then take it to your own kitchen, which in this case would be the ribosome, where you can then produce your protein. All right, that is it for genetic control organelles. So stay tuned.